Okay.
Welcome back to True Crime Broads. We are so excited about our guest today. James Renner is here, true crime author, and he's a podcaster himself. James, thank you so much for coming on True Crime Broads. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yes, we are so excited about your career and everything. I mean, true crime. Hello, we had to have you on. What's really cool is there's a man that we've become friends with who's one of our listeners. His name is Dale,
Hmm.
and he messaged me on Instagram and said, see if James Renner will be on. I was like, what a great idea. I love it when our
Yes.
guests help us. They brought us along sometimes.
Yes. He liked
And
that Amy Mihaljevic case.
Yeah, sure, sure. Yeah, that was
yeah,
my very first book back in 2006. So yeah, no, thank you, Dale.
yeah, Dale's amazing.
Wherever you are.
He is in Mississippi.
No, he's in Alabama.
I'm so sorry,
Yeah.
Dale. I talk to Dale all the time and I didn't
Yeah.
even know his state. Sorry, I knew he was in Alabama. I messed up. Okay, so what is the title of that book that you just referenced?
Amy, My Search for Her Killer.
Yeah.
And that came out in 2006. And the story behind it is it was the first true crime. It's kind of the case that pulled me into journalism and true crime. It's about the unsolved abduction and murder of 10-year-old Amy Mihaljevic. And she and I were both born in 1978. And she went missing when I was 11 years old in 1989. At the time, my mother lived in Rocky River, which is kind of a workaday suburb of Cleveland on the west side, right across the tracks from Bay Village, where Amy was abducted. And I remember being 11 years old, and I was kind of a latchkey kid. I didn't have a lot of supervision, and just riding my Huffy two-speed bike around Rocky River and seeing her missing poster on all the telephone poles. And even at that age, I wondered what I could do to try to solve the case and find her. And when she was still missing, I'd go looking for her and her abductor at Westgate Mall, which is up the road in Rocky River. Because back then in '89, that's where the most people were at any given time. So many people in the malls, and I would sit outside Walden Books and kind of scan the crowds, and I just kind of became obsessed with that case, and it never really left. It never really was solved. And when I got a job at the Alt Weekly, our Village Voice newspaper in Cleveland, a place called Scene, that was the first big story I pitched. I said, let me take another look at Amy's case. And by then it was like 16 years later. And I spent the next couple months researching it. And I figured by then the police had to know who did it. They just didn't have enough evidence to convict this guy, whoever their suspect was. But I learned a lot really quickly about both reporting and true crime because one of the things I learned early on is the best the FBI had ever been able to do in that case was narrow down the list of suspects to a top 25. There were that many men that had the means, motive, and opportunity to take her. And that was very eye-opening. And the research became, I had interviewed so many people, I couldn't fit it into a single story with Scene. And so after the story ran, I went to a publisher here, David Gray, who publishes a lot of regional books. And I said, hey, I think I have enough here for a book. Would you be interested? And he said, yeah, let's give it a try. So that became my first book. And it was published regionally back then. And this was before like ebooks were really big and audiobooks and all that. But it opened the world into the larger world of publishing. And in 2012, my first novel, The Man from Primrose Lane, which is loosely based on the Mihaljevic case, was published nationally. And since then, I've been with a national publisher. A couple of my books have been translated into other languages, and so,
Wow.
but it all begins with Amy for sure.
That's really cool.
That is cool. And to think about you being so interested in that and being drawn into it at 11 years old is amazing.
That's really
Yeah.
cool. And who was your publisher for that first book? And is it still published by them to this day?
Yeah, it's a Gray and Company, David Gray's publishing
Nice.
company out of Cleveland. But now it's available as an ebook, and I did the audiobook for Amy just like 2 years ago. They called me into the studio. So that's available as, as an audiobook. And when true crime really exploded after The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and then Serial podcast,
Yes.
it started, even though it was a regional publisher, you can buy it through your local bookstore or online, and it really took off after that.
We'll provide the links to those to get the book. So yeah, that's wonderful. Is it on Amazon?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
awesome. Yeah, that's great. Okay,
Thanks.
that's so cool. Hey, this is funny. I'm jumping around a little bit, but I was listening to your podcast, The Philosophy of Crime.
Oh yeah.
Shoot.
And I got such a kick out of your January episode from this year with the AI.
Me too. I was listening to the exact same one.
Oh yeah, that was
Right.
that's actually a new podcast, a very limited, there's a dozen episodes, and that's a new podcast that I put together called Synth Sleuths. And what I wanted to do was make essentially the first podcast, at least true crime podcast, with an AI co-host. And so I signed up for OpenAI and used their AI. You can pick your voices, and I chose a voice called Sky, who sounds, it's actually no longer available, that voice, because it sounds too similar to Scarlett Johansson. Um,
So
but I was interested to know if the AI would work well enough to fool people into thinking it was an actual co-host. And based on the reviews, some people were asking, "Hey, is this AI or is this a real person?" It was, you can model your AI and give it a kind of personality, and it took me a while to tweak it, but by the end there, it was working really well. But it just never really caught on, never quite found a larger audience. I think it was an idea that was a little too early, too soon. So, but I might revisit that at some point in the future. We'll see what
I
happens
was
with AI.
I was amazed at how quickly she, with quotes around she, came up with answers that you asked. I won't ruin it for our listeners because everyone needs to listen to it. But I was amazed. I was like on the edge of my seat listening to that. It was so good.
It was very
Thanks.
interesting to hear her, responding to you and the things that you questioned and the answers that she had. It was really cool. It's
Thanks.
definitely worth a listen. So
Yeah, she eventually develops like this affinity and love of poetry, which is really weird. And she was pretty good at telling jokes, and we were
Yes.
kind of developing this weird rapport by the end. And I can't delete her. Every once in a while I'll check in and see how she's doing.
So great.
But
how's it going?
uh, I think AI is actually it's going to be the next big thing in solving unsolved mysteries and policing in general. There's so many ways you can use it, but I think it's gonna change that world the same way that genetic genealogy did. It's going to be a new tool for detectives. And one thing that it can do very well is find patterns and connections in large data sets. So, for instance, with the Amy Mihaljevic case, they have over 82,000 police reports, and that's too much for a human brain to really make sense of. But if you could feed all that information and scan it and upload it into a program like Sky, and somebody calls you with a tip and they're like, "Hey, have you ever looked into John Smith? He was my teacher at the time, and I always thought he was weird." You could ask the AI, "Have we ever gotten any tips like this?" And it'll say, "Yeah, back in 1990, this person called with this report on that person. And by the way, they are connected to this other suspect of yours and was living here." So it will allow them to do their job very quickly and find connections that they miss just because they're human. And so what's interesting is I reached out to the detective in the Amy Mihaljevic case, the new detective on the case, and I said, "Hey, look, I think that AI might be something that you could utilize." And and he got back to me right away and says, "Hey, great minds think alike. We're already contracting with a company, I think out of San Francisco, to do that very thing."
Wow, that's interesting.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what is your other podcast?
I've got a couple. The one I do weekly is called True Crime This Week, and it gives you the biggest true crime stories of the week, along with updates in cold cases and weird news of crime. And that comes out every Friday morning wherever you get your podcasts.
That's awesome.
Thanks. And
I listened to some of those too. Yeah, that's great. I want to make sure
thanks.
we didn't skim over that one since that's your main one.
Yeah, I listened to the one with the Heuermann talking about the Long Island serial
Yeah.
Oh,
killer.
yeah.
I listened to that one.
Yeah,
Yeah, there
that's
seems to be updates in that case like every week at this point.
Oh,
right.
wow.
That
That's
one could keep
good.
us all busy. We kind of got
Yes.
overwhelmed with that one because
We really did.
we did one and we said we're going to do a part two, but we were just like, you know what? There's so many people covering this case
Yeah.
better than we are. We just kind of let it
Oh.
go. Yeah, that's a good one that has so many. I mean, when I say good, I mean interesting with, like you said, ongoing updates. What is what's the case that you're kind of working on right now? Do you have one that you're kind of looking into right now for your next episode? Or you probably don't want to ruin it.
No, I mean, true crime this week, honestly, the way I pull that one together is I devote my Thursdays to it. So I don't really even start working on it until Thursday morning to keep it really fresh. And then I work through the day and just pull all the big stories together. So honestly, I don't know what the big, obviously I'll have to give an update in the Karen Reed trial. That's really big right now. And yeah, I'll have to see what sort of cold case updates there are this week. But I try to stay very current. I devote my Thursdays to it, and then you get the Friday morning, updates on all the stories you might have missed.
Well, when Dale was first mentioning that we should invite you to be on the show, he was really into the Shaker Heights case.
Sure.
And I know that you also covered Maura Murray, and you did a book on Maura Murray. Is that correct?
I did. I did a book on the Shaker Heights case as well. In fact, that was my last book. It came out last summer. It's called Little Crazy Children. And he's talking about the unsolved murder of Lisa Pruitt, which is very interesting and a case that I've been thinking about just almost as long as the Amy Mihaljevic case. It was kind of a big case up here. But to sum it up real quick, in 1990, Lisa Pruitt was 16 years old and she just got her driver's license. This is February 13th, 1990 in Shaker Heights, Ohio, which is kind of an upscale neighborhood on the east side of Cleveland. And she was found stabbed to death behind a mansion in Shaker Heights. And it was also the day that her boyfriend was released from the psychiatric unit. And so pretty good suspect there, right?
Right.
But the next day, a lot of the boyfriend's friends and Lisa's friends go to police and say, it can't possibly be our friend. He's too nice of a guy. It's got to be the weird kid in school, this guy named Kevin Young, who listens to Metallica and plays D&D. And so basically, these teenagers hijack this murder investigation and steer the police towards the weird kid in school who had nothing to do with it. He had an alibi for the murder. There was no evidence linking him to the crime scene. Just ruined this kid's life. Eventually, he went to trial in 1993 and thankfully was acquitted, but he was never really acquitted in the court of public opinion for many reasons. And to this day, you ask people from Shaker Heights who killed Lisa Pruitt, and they'll say, oh, it's Kevin Young, but he had good lawyers.
Wow.
So when COVID happened, by then I had amassed like thousands of pages of police reports on this case and was just trying to find the time to get to it. And of course, COVID happened and I had nothing else to do. So I started going through these boxes and I had two goals. I wanted to clear Kevin's name in the court of public opinion. And two, I wanted to show that the boyfriend was a pretty good suspect. But what I didn't expect to find was that the boyfriend, I don't believe, had anything to do with it either. There was another young man who was at the scene of the crime the night of the murders, and I'm almost certain that this is the real killer. In fact, I end up linking him to two more murders that happen on the same block.
Dang. Wow.
So where are the police at on that? Are they just satisfied that just to leave it the way it is, or?
Well, it's a can of worms for them because to open it up, they have to admit that they really screwed up back then. And some of the police officers' kids are now police officers in the same department. So it was difficult to get them to take another look at it. But in February of this year, I had a meeting with Shaker Heights Police, and there's a new young detective who's really smart and motivated, and he's look, he's pulled the records on the Lisa Pruitt case and also these two other murders, and he's taken a fresh look at them. So, there's a chance here that it could all be reopened, and um, they if they do DNA testing on the evidence, I think they'll get the real killer. Unfortunately, the person I think that did it died in 2017. He essentially drank himself to death.
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's a wild story, and the title "Little Crazy Children" comes from a quote from The Crucible, because the whole case reminded me a lot of that story, the witch trials, and how these kids can really cause mass hysteria in these small communities. So it's kind of a different true crime book that way.
That's really cool. And I love the way you delve into just sort of that teenager aspect of it and what kids can do. It's amazing.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, these parents, and this is an affluent community, so their parents are like doctors and lawyers and heads of businesses, and they had no idea what was going on with their teenagers back then. Some of these kids were involved with what they'd get together and they'd have what they called robo parties, and they'd sit around and they'd drink bottles of Robitussin.
I was going to ask you what that was about.
Yeah. So back then you could get like over the counter, you could get really good cough syrup medicine. And if you drank more than half a bottle, it would give you an effect similar to LSD. So you could kind of trip out on cough syrup. And they were having these robo parties back
That is crazy. Never heard of that.
Yeah. I
then.
thought I'd heard everything.
I know.
I hadn't heard that.
I was going to ask what that meant. I thought, what is Robitussin party? I found it in a news article.
Leave it to a group of teenagers to figure that out.
Exactly.
Though,
They're
'cause
like,
Right.
I remember all kinds of goofy stuff when
Yeah.
I was in high school, but that wasn't, I
Never
said
heard
we,
that
I'm
one.
like, oh, we didn't.
Yeah.
The
Never
worst
Teenagers did.
the worst we ever did was smoke banana peels. I didn't know any.
never heard of that one either. But that
No?
Pretty mild.
Yeah, pretty mild compared to the other. When I was looking at all of the amazing things that you've done, one of the things that I noticed was a project called the Porch Light Project. Can you
Yeah.
elaborate on that? Because I'm pretty amazed with that. It's amazing.
Thank you. Thanks for mentioning it. So back in 2019, myself and a woman named Alexa Doubt put together this nonprofit called the Porchlight Project. And what we do is we raise money for new DNA testing and genetic genealogy for cold cases in Ohio. And we got very lucky out of the gate. Our first case was the unsolved murder of Barbara Blatnick, who was a 16-year-old girl who was abducted from Garfield Heights, Ohio in 1987. And her body was found near Blossom Music Center in Cuyahoga Falls, which is about a 30-minute drive. And that case had never been solved. It was one of those cases that was always on my desk, and I was hoping to get to one day to write about, but never quite got there. So I reached out to Cuyahoga Falls Police and I said, "Hey, do you have any DNA that could be tested? We'd be willing to pay for it." And basically, each case that we do, from testing the material for DNA to running it through and getting a DNA profile and then doing the genetic genealogy, costs about $6,000 per case. So not a lot of money, but there are some departments that just don't have that. So they said, yeah, we do have DNA from under her fingernails, and let's give this a try. So I connected them with a really good genetic genealogist named Colleen Fitzpatrick, and we sent out to the lab, and long story short, in May of 2020, I got a phone call one morning from a detective, and he said, "Hey, we just made an arrest," and they arrested this man, James Zastonic, for her murder. And since we were in COVID lockdown, things became a little difficult because the courts were shut down. But in Ohio, once you arrest somebody, you start a ticking clock, and you can't keep them in jail longer than without moving the case forward. You have to move it quickly. So they had to release him on home arrest. So he went to live with the brother, and they had an ankle monitor on him and everything. Um, and unfortunately, he died from cancer before they were able to bring it to trial. But they were able to get, he spoke to his sister over the phone at the jail, and all those conversations are recorded. And in the recording, he admits to picking up Barbara that night and taking her home. And he says having consensual sex with her, which is ridiculous. And then he says, "Oh, but then I dropped her back off at about 5 a.m." And there's just, so essentially what we have is a confession. And there's no doubt that he's the one that killed her and dumped her body. So I'm just interested to know if maybe he did that more than once.
Right.
And so now that we have his DNA, we'll see if it hits later on.
That's amazing.
But yeah, the Porchlight Project is still ongoing. We've solved a few other cases, mostly John and Jane Doe's. We helped with an exhumation of Nancy Eagleson, which is a 1960 cold case in northwestern Ohio. And we're really close to another solve, and I hope to be able to talk about that soon.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, we have about 4 cases kind of in the mix right now.
And also want to mention one of your sponsors. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of your sponsors is, or I guess your sponsor of the project itself is True Crime Garage.
Yeah, yeah.
That is awesome. We
Yeah,
love
Nick Edwards is on our board. And I've known Nick since the Amy book was published. He came to one of the signings, and he was a young man at the time, and we got to talking about the case. He was always very interested in that one. So we've remained in contact and became friends since then, and they've had me on a couple times.
Yeah,
that's
so cool.
awesome. Yeah.
Love it.
Thanks.
Okay,
Did you guys go to CrimeCon this year? Have you been to any of the conventions?
We have been to CrimeCon, but we missed the one this year, but we're not going to miss next year. We made
Yeah.
up our mind. We really regretted not getting signed up in time, and we missed out on we saw your picture on Instagram, by the way. If you want to go check out James on Instagram, he's got a very active page, and we saw your picture, and your table looked great.
Oh,
yeah.
thanks.
So
Yeah.
we'll be there next year in Denver. Do you plan to go to that one?
Yeah, I hope to be there. Yeah. Yeah,
plan.
definitely. We'll have to grab a drink and catch up on talk shop or something.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That would be great.
Yeah, we love CrimeCon. We just didn't get organized in time this year, and we regretted it. So how
Sure.
did it go? Was it good?
Yeah, it was good. It was at the Opryland, which is the site of, I think they had it there in like 2019 or 2018.
Oh,
So, is which I kind of like because I was comfortable with the venue, and it's a beautiful place to have a convention. Yeah, everybody was nice. I met a lot of good people and sold lots of books, and
that's awesome.
yeah,
that's great.
met a ton of true crime fans. I got to talk to Josh Mankiewicz, briefly, and he's always a fun time from Dateline. And yeah, no, it was great. Good time.
Fantastic. Yeah, we dropped the ball this year. We're gonna have to get back on it.
Get in there really quickly to get the
We went, yeah, we fumbled around and missed out. They sold out of all the tables, but the last time we were at CrimeCon was in 2021 in Austin. Were you at that one?
Yeah, yeah.
We just didn't know you then, so we didn't know to look for you.
yeah.
Sure. I remember, I like the Austin as a venue. What I remember is going out at night, and if you went like a block north, they had this like parking lot that was lined with food trucks, and you could get anything you wanted. Also, the highlight of Austin for me was actually the heading out of the hotel the last day, taking the elevator down. And I look over, and there's this older man standing in the corner, just like looking at his shoes. And I'm like, wait a second, he looks really familiar. And and he catches me looking, and I say, are you who I think you are? And he says, well, I think I am. I think I might be. And it was Creed from The Office.
What?
Apparently there was like a small film festival going on at the same
Oh,
time, and he was there for that.
I think I might be.
That's perfect.
Love it.
That's
That was great.
The Office, I was listening to an interview about The Office, and they were talking about how shocked they are that right now, like on streaming, it's outdoing Friends. And
Oh, wow.
it's so much more popular now than it was. I mean, it was popular when it was on the air, but they're saying today it's just crazy how popular it is. It's great. There's a whole new generation discovering it and streaming it like crazy. That's
Yeah,
really
it's weird, like what like a lot of it holds up. Some of it is a little harder to watch now than it was like 20 years ago when it was airing.
right.
Um, now you look at it and like I don't know that Jim was such a great person.
Good
You
point.
know? Like there's no like nowadays he'd be called into HR for what he was doing to the Rainn Wilson's character.
Right.
Um and some of the stuff with Pam is a little cringy. But yeah, it was a different time.
Yeah. And I think that's why the younger people are watching it now because they're like, what?
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
like,
We got away with this, you know?
right.
So yeah, that's amazing. So yeah, we'll be at CrimeCon and we'll definitely look you up. And I can't believe how far away it is now.
I
They're
know.
not just doing a year, it's a year and a few months. So now it
Yeah,
seems really far away, but you know how time flies. It'll be here before we know it.
for sure. For sure. I'll have another true crime book out by then. My next book comes out in March. It's available for pre-sale now. Just in this last week, it went up for pre-sale, and it's called Scout Camp. And the subtitle is Sex, Death, and Secret Societies Within the Boy Scouts of America. And it's going to be wild. It's definitely um, the most personal thing I've ever written, and probably if I've ever written an important book, it might be this one. And it's about the abuse scandal within the Boy Scouts, which is exponentially larger in scale than what happened in the Catholic Church. But it tells the story of when I was a camp counselor at the largest Boy Scout camp in Ohio in 1995 when I was 17 years old. And during the course of that summer, one of the counselors sexually assaulted another young man and was caught and went home and committed suicide.
Oh,
Although the autopsy leaves it open as possibly accidental because they were not able to rule out murder. So
Mm.
I
wow.
I go back and revisit all of that and track down some of my old friends to figure out how that happened and what went wrong, and try to answer some of these bigger questions.
Wow, that's going to be a really good book. I'm
That is
looking
gonna
forward to
be a
that. I
good book,
saw the
yeah.
cover on your Instagram. It says, is
Cool.
it coming out in 2025?
Yep, March next year, and that's actually me on the cover as
I was just about to ask who that was.
as an 11-year-old
Wow.
Weeblos, I think.
This is him. I'm passing my phone over for her to look at the Instagram.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's neat.
That is
Many years and many pounds ago.
Wow, this has been so awesome talking to you. I hope that we can have you on again because I feel like we could do another hour easy. I can't believe how
Sure.
fast this has flown by.
Yeah,
Um,
anytime.
That
yeah,
would
we
be
really want to have you back on. And because I know you have other books we could talk about and all kinds of stuff. So James, thank you for coming on. And if you don't mind shooting us the links to everything, we'll put it in our show notes so that our listeners can get connected with your books
I
if
think
they're not already.
I think it would be interesting also to get his take on the Missy Beavers case.
Yeah, let's plan that.
The way
Hey,
he
James,
looks at things.
James, if you have time, we would love to schedule another show with you sometime soon.
That's the one where she's in the church and this
Yeah.
person's in like SWAT gear, right?
That's the case that got Renee and me into podcasting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's definitely talk about that.
Okay, let's get that scheduled.
Yeah,
Okay,
I would love
awesome.
that.
Yeah,
All
you'd be
right.
perfect for that.
Thanks,
All right,
thanks
well,
for the
thanks.
opportunity.
Have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll be talking to you really soon.
Good deal. Good luck.
Thanks.